I watched the handcuffs click around my sister's wrists as she screamed my name, her face twisted with rage and disbelief. The lottery officials stood beside the police officers, holding the winning ticket, my winning ticket, that had just been declared stolen property. Sarah's boyfriend backed away from her slowly, his eyes wide with horror as he realized what kind of person he'd been dating. The cameras from 3 different news stations captured every second of her public downfall. "You set me up!" She shrieked at me across the parking lot of the lottery headquarters. "This is all your fault!" I smiled and waved goodbye as they loaded her into the police car. After 28 years of being her victim, watching her steal everything I'd ever loved or earned, I'd finally gotten my revenge. And the beautiful part? She'd done most of the work herself. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start from the beginning, back when I was naive enough to think my sister might actually change. Growing up in the Morrison household meant living in Sarah's shadow. She was 3 years older, blonde where I was brunette, outgoing where I was shy, and our parents' obvious favorite from the day I was born. Mom used to joke that Sarah was their miracle baby after years of trying, and I was just the surprise that came later. That joke stopped being funny around the time I turned 5 and realized it wasn't really a joke at all. Sarah had a talent for making my life miserable while somehow always looking like the victim. When I was 8 and she was 11, I saved up my allowance for months to buy a beautiful music box with a dancing ballerina inside. The day after I brought it home, I found it smashed on my bedroom floor. Sarah tearfully told our parents that I'd accidentally knocked it over during one of my clumsy spells and then blamed her to avoid getting in trouble. They believed her, of course. They always believed her. When I made the honor roll in high school, Sarah suddenly developed mysterious stomach problems that required emergency doctor visits on the same day as my award ceremony. When I got accepted to State University with a partial scholarship, Sarah decided she wanted to go there too, despite having never shown any interest in academics. Somehow, our parents found the money for her full tuition while telling me I'd have to take out loans to cover what my scholarship didn't pay for. The pattern continued into adulthood. When I started dating Marcus in college, the first boy who'd ever really seen me, who made me feel beautiful and interesting, Sarah swooped in during Christmas break. She flirted with him relentlessly at family gatherings, wore low-cut tops and short skirts, and generally made herself impossible to ignore. By New Year's Eve, Marcus was kissing her instead of me. They dated for 3 months before she got bored and moved on, leaving me heartbroken and humiliated. When I landed my first real job after graduation at a marketing firm, Sarah suddenly discovered she had a passion for marketing too. She applied to the same company, charmed her way through the interview process, and somehow convinced them to create a position for her in my department. Within 6 months, she was taking credit for my ideas and had maneuvered herself into the promotion I'd been working toward for 2 years. Each time, I told myself things would be different. Each time, I believed her tearful apologies and promises to change. I was the eternal optimist, always hoping that somewhere inside my selfish, manipulative sister was the loving sibling I'd always wanted. I was also, I now realize, incredibly stupid. The final straw came last spring, though I didn't know it at the time. I'd been working as a freelance graphic designer for 3 years, slowly building up a client base and finally starting to make decent money. My biggest client was a local restaurant chain that was expanding statewide, and they'd hinted about offering me a long-term contract that would set me up financially for years. Sarah, meanwhile, had been fired from her latest job for creative differences with her boss, which I later learned meant she'd been caught taking expensive lunches with clients and charging them to the company credit card. She was living back at home with our parents, claiming she needed time to find herself and explore her options. That's when she came to me with tears in her eyes and a story about how she'd always admired my creativity and independence. She wanted to learn the business, she said. She wanted us to be partners, to finally work together as sisters should. All she needed was for me to introduce her to a few clients, teach her the basics, and maybe let her help with some smaller projects until she got on her feet. I should have known better. I really should have. But the little girl inside me who'd always wanted her big sister's approval heard what she wanted to hear. I introduced Sarah to my clients, including the restaurant chain owner, as my business partner and creative consultant. I taught her how to use the design software, shared my client management strategies, and even let her sit in on meetings to learn the ropes. Within 2 months, she'd stolen my biggest client and half my others. She'd convinced them that she was the real creative talent behind our work and that I was just the technical support. When I confronted her, she looked me straight in the eye and said, "Business is business, Anna. Maybe if you were better at selling yourself, this wouldn't have happened." That was 6 months ago. Since then, I'd been struggling to rebuild my client base while Sarah flourished with my stolen contacts. She moved out of our parents' house and into a fancy downtown apartment, bought herself a new car, and started posting constantly on social media about her successful design business. Our parents couldn't stop gushing about how proud they were of her entrepreneurial spirit. I, meanwhile, was barely scraping by. I'd had to move back in with my college roommate and take a part-time job at a coffee shop just to pay my bills. Every night, I fell asleep angry, and every morning, I woke up angrier. But I didn't know what to do about it. Sarah had always been smarter than me, more charming, more ruthless. She knew how to play the game in ways I never could. That's when fate intervened in the most unexpected way possible. It was a Tuesday in early October when it happened. I'd just finished my shift at the coffee shop and was walking to my car when I noticed the homeless man sitting by the parking meter. He was older, maybe in his 60s, with kind eyes and clothes that had seen better days. Something about him reminded me of my grandfather, who died when I was 12. "Excuse me, miss," he called out as I passed. "I don't suppose you could spare some change? I haven't eaten today." I only had a few dollars in my wallet, but something made me stop. Maybe it was the way he'd asked so politely. Or maybe it was just the kind of day where showing a little kindness to someone else made me feel less sorry for myself. I pulled out a $5 bill and handed it to him. "Thank you so much," he said, his face lighting up. "You know, good things come to people who are generous to strangers. I hope you get everything you deserve in life." I smiled and wished him well, thinking nothing more of it as I drove home. But as I was pulling into my driveway, I remembered that I still had that lottery ticket in my glove compartment, the one I'd bought on impulse 3 days earlier when the jackpot hit $42 million. I'd never won more than $5 on a lottery ticket in my life, but something told me to check it. I pulled out my phone and looked up the winning numbers from that morning's drawing. Then I checked my ticket once, twice, 3 times. My hands started shaking as the reality hit me. I had just won $42 million. For about 10 minutes, I sat in my car in complete shock. Then I started laughing, huge, hysterical laughs that probably made me look completely insane to anyone watching. After years of struggling, after months of watching Sarah profit from my stolen work, after a lifetime of being second best, I had just become independently wealthy. But even as I celebrated, a darker thought crept into my mind. Sarah would find out about this eventually. She always found out about everything good that happened to me. And when she did, she'd find a way to ruin it or take it from me, just like she always had. She'd probably claim she was the one who told me to buy the ticket, or that we'd made some kind of agreement to split any winnings, or that I owed her money and should share. Our parents would side with her, like they always did. Somehow, some way, she'd find a way to make my miracle into her payday. Unless I was very, very careful. That night, I did something I'd never done before in my life. I made a plan to destroy my sister before she could destroy me. And I had the perfect opportunity because I knew Sarah better than she knew herself. I knew exactly how her greedy, entitled mind worked. I knew she'd never be able to resist taking something that belonged to me, especially something this valuable. All I had to do was give her the chance. The first step was research. I spent the next 3 days learning everything I could about lottery security, fraud prevention, and what happened to people who tried to claim tickets that didn't belong to them. What I found was encouraging. The State Lottery Commission took fraud very seriously, and they had sophisticated methods for verifying ticket ownership and investigating suspicious claims. They worked closely with law enforcement, and the penalties for lottery fraud were severe, up to 10 years in prison and massive fines. I also learned that lottery tickets were legally considered bearer bonds, meaning that whoever possessed the physical ticket was presumed to be the owner. However, if someone could prove that a ticket had been stolen from them, the thief could be prosecuted for grand theft and fraud, regardless of whether they'd tried to claim the prize yet. That gave me an idea, a beautiful, perfect, utterly satisfying idea. I spent the next week setting up my trap. First, I made photocopies of the winning ticket from multiple angles, documenting the serial numbers, barcodes, and every other identifying mark. I photographed myself holding the ticket with a newspaper showing the date, and I saved the receipt from when I'd purchased it, which included a timestamp and the store's security camera footage number. Then, I created a digital trail. I sent myself an email with photos of the ticket attached, describing how excited I was about my lottery win and how I was planning to quit my job and travel the world. I made sure the email was dated 2 days after the drawing, but several days before I planned to spring my trap. I also told my roommate about winning, swearing her to secrecy, but making sure she'd remember the conversation if anyone ever asked. Most importantly, I went to my bank and rented a safety deposit box. In front of multiple witnesses, I placed the photocopies of the ticket, the original receipt, and a written statement describing how I'd won into the box. I made sure the bank's records would show exactly when I'd accessed the box and what I'd deposited. While I was laying this groundwork, I also started acting the part of someone who was completely oblivious to their good fortune. I kept working at the coffee shop, kept complaining about money, kept acting like the same struggling artist I'd always been. When Sarah called to gloat about landing another one of my former clients, I played the role of defeated little sister perfectly. "I don't know what I'm doing wrong," I told her, letting my voice crack with fake emotion. "Maybe I'm just not cut out for this business. Maybe you were always the talented one." "Oh, honey," she cooed with fake sympathy. "You're just going through a rough patch. Things will turn around eventually." The condescension in her voice made me want to reach through the phone and strangle her, but instead I just sighed dramatically. "I hope so. I'm so broke I can't even afford groceries this week. I've been living on ramen noodles and whatever free pastries they let me take home from the coffee shop." "Well, maybe this will teach you to be more business savvy in the future," she said. "You can't just expect success to fall into your lap." If only she knew. 2 weeks after my win, I decided it was time to set the trap. I called Sarah and asked if I could come over to her apartment to talk. I told her I was feeling really depressed about my situation and needed some sisterly advice. She agreed, probably looking forward to another opportunity to kick me while I was down. When I arrived at her place, the fancy downtown apartment that should have been mine, I made sure to look appropriately pathetic. I wore my rattiest jeans and an old sweater with a hole in the elbow. I brought a box of tissues and made sure my eyes looked red and puffy, as if I'd been crying. "Oh, Anna," Sarah said as she let me in, her voice dripping with fake concern. "You look terrible. What's going on?" I launched into a prepared sob story about how I was behind on rent, how I might have to give up on graphic design altogether, how I felt like a complete failure. Sarah listened with the expression of someone watching a particularly entertaining reality show, sympathetic on the surface, but clearly enjoying my misery underneath. "Have you thought about getting a more stable job?" she suggested. "Maybe something in retail or food service? There's no shame in honest work." The irony of her suggesting I work in food service while sitting in an apartment paid for with my stolen clients was almost too much to bear, but I managed to keep playing my role. "I know," I said, dabbing at my fake tears. "I've been applying everywhere. I even bought a lottery ticket yesterday. Can you believe it? Like I'm going to magically win millions of dollars and solve all my problems." I pulled the ticket out of my purse and waved it around dismissively. $42 million jackpot. As if I'd ever be that lucky. Sarah's eyes locked onto the ticket like a hawk spotting prey. "Oh, have you checked if you won anything?" "No, what's the point?" I said, tossing the ticket onto her coffee table like it was garbage. "I never win anything. I'm probably the unluckiest person alive." I saw her eyes follow the ticket's path to the table, where it landed face up with all the numbers clearly visible. She tried to look casual as she glanced at it, but I could practically see the wheels turning in her head. We chatted for another hour about my hopeless situation, while Sarah periodically glanced at the ticket on her table. When I finally got up to leave, I made a big show of gathering my things while accidentally leaving the ticket behind. "Oh, Anna, you forgot this," Sarah said, picking up the ticket and holding it out to me. "What? Oh, that stupid lottery ticket. You can throw it away if you want. It's not like it's worth anything." "Are you sure? Maybe you should check the numbers first." I waved my hand dismissively. Trust me, I never win anything. But if it makes you feel better, you can check it for me. If, by some miracle, it's worth anything, we'll split whatever it is. The lie rolled off my tongue so easily it surprised me. But I could see the effect it had on Sarah, her eyes lit up with greed and possibility. Okay, she said, trying to sound casual. I'll check it for you and let you know. I hugged her goodbye and drove home, knowing exactly what was going to happen next. Sarah would check those numbers, realize I'd just handed her a $42 million lottery ticket, and then she'd have to make a choice. She could call me and tell me the truth, or she could do what she'd always done, take what was mine and convince herself she deserved it. I gave her exactly 18 hours to make the right choice. When my phone didn't ring, I knew she'd chosen exactly as I'd expected. The next morning, I called her. Hey, did you ever check that lottery ticket for me? There was a long pause before she answered. Oh, that old thing? Yeah, I checked it. Sorry, Anna, but it wasn't a winner. I threw it away. Really? Damn, I was kind of hoping for at least a free ticket or something. Nope, nothing. Better luck next time. The ease with which she lied to me was breathtaking, even though I'd expected it. This was my sister, someone who'd shared a childhood with me, who'd seen me cry over boys and celebrate small victories and struggle through college. And she was stealing $42 million from me without a second thought. Oh well, I said cheerfully. I guess I'll just have to figure out another way to pay rent this month. I'm sure you will, she said. You're resourceful. After I hung up, I sat in my room for a long time, thinking about everything Sarah had taken from me over the years. The music box, Marcus, my clients, my confidence, my relationship with our parents. And now the biggest prize of all, my chance at financial freedom and independence. But this time was different. This time, I was ready for her. Over the next few days, I watched Sarah's social media carefully. She didn't post anything unusual at first, probably planning to wait a reasonable amount of time before suddenly becoming wealthy, but I could tell she was already spending money. There were subtle changes in her lifestyle that only someone who knew her well would notice. She started ordering expensive takeout instead of cooking. She got her nails done at a high-end salon instead of the budget place she usually went to. She bought a new purse that I recognized as a designer brand. A week after my visit, she finally made her move. She posted a cryptic status update about unexpected good fortune and the universe rewarding good people. Then she started dropping hints to friends about a windfall and life-changing news that she'd share soon. 2 weeks after I'd left the ticket on her table, Sarah called to invite me to dinner at Romano's, the most expensive restaurant in town. My treat, she said magnanimously. I want to celebrate with my little sister. Celebrate what? I asked innocently. I'll tell you when you get here. Just trust me, you're going to be so happy for me. I agreed to meet her, already knowing exactly what she was planning to tell me. She was going to claim she'd won the lottery herself, with a ticket she'd bought on impulse. She'd probably say it happened the day after our conversation, inspired by our talk about luck and fortune. She might even offer to help me with my financial problems, playing the generous big sister while actually spending my money. I arrived at Romano's to find Sarah already seated at the best table in the house, wearing a new dress that probably cost more than I made in a month. Her face was glowing with excitement and self-satisfaction. Anna, she called out, waving me over. Come sit down. I have the most amazing news. I sat down and listened as she launched into her prepared story. She'd bought a lottery ticket on impulse, she said, just a day after our conversation about luck. She'd forgotten about it for almost a week before remembering to check the numbers. When she did, she couldn't believe her eyes. She'd won $42 million. Can you believe it? She gushed. Your big sister is a millionaire. I forced myself to look appropriately shocked and excited. Oh my God, Sarah, that's incredible. When did this happen? Last Wednesday. I've been meeting with lawyers and financial advisors all week, trying to figure out how to handle everything. I'm going to take the lump sum, about $25 million after taxes. Can you imagine? $25 million of my money. I smiled and congratulated her, playing the role of the proud little sister perfectly. You know what this means, though? She said, reaching across the table to squeeze my hand. I can finally help you get back on your feet. I know things have been tough for you lately. The condescension in her voice made my skin crawl, but I managed to look grateful. Sarah, you don't have to. No, I insist, she said. We're family. I was thinking I could give you, say, $50,000? That should be enough to pay off your debts and get you started in a new career. Maybe something more stable than graphic design. $50,000. Out of the 42 million she'd stolen from me, she was generously offering to give me 50,000. The sheer audacity of it was almost impressive. That's so generous, I managed to say. Are you sure? Of course. What's money for if not to help the people you love? If I'd had any lingering doubts about what I was planning to do to her, they evaporated in that moment. Sarah wasn't just a thief. She was a thief who thought she was being charitable by returning 0.1% of what she'd stolen. There is one thing, though, she continued. I need to keep this quiet for a little while longer. I haven't claimed the prize yet. I want to get all my ducks in a row first, you know? Make sure I have the right legal and financial team in place, so please don't tell anyone, okay? Not even mom and dad. Of course, I said. Your secret is safe with me. She was planning to wait, I realized. She wanted to make sure enough time passed that no one would connect her sudden wealth to my visit to her apartment. She was being careful, which I had to admire, even as it made me hate her more. We spent the rest of dinner with Sarah, describing her plans for her newfound wealth. She was going to quit her business, travel the world, buy a house in the hills, start a charity foundation. She talked about hiring staff and buying art and investing in startups. She had already mentally spent every penny of my money. The best part, she said as we were finishing dessert, is that I'll never have to worry about money again. I can do whatever I want, help whoever I want, be whoever I want to be. It's like getting a completely fresh start in life. That sounds amazing, I said. You deserve this, Sarah. You really do. She beamed at me, completely missing the sarcasm in my voice. Thank you, Anna. That means so much coming from you. As I drove home from dinner, I felt a cold satisfaction settling over me. Sarah had made her choice. She'd decided to steal my lottery ticket and lie to my face about it. She'd offered me a tiny fraction of my own money and acted like she was being generous. She'd made plans to spend the next several decades living off my good fortune while I struggled in poverty. Now it was time for her to face the consequences. The next morning, I drove to the police station and filed a report for grand theft. I brought with me all the evidence I'd carefully assembled: the photocopies of the ticket, the receipt with timestamp, the photos of me holding the ticket with the dated newspaper, the bank records showing when I'd put the documentation in my safety deposit box, and a written statement describing exactly what had happened. Detective Martinez, the officer who took my statement, listened to my story with growing interest. So let me make sure I understand this, he said. You bought this lottery ticket 2 weeks ago, it won $42 million, and your sister has stolen it and is planning to claim the prize herself? That's correct. I left it on her coffee table by accident during a visit. And when I asked her about it the next day, she told me she'd checked it and it wasn't a winner. But I have proof that I bought it, and I believe she's planning to claim the prize herself. Detective Martinez examined all my documentation carefully. This is very thorough, he said. Most people don't think to document lottery tickets this way. I've learned to be careful when it comes to my sister, I said. She has a history of taking things that belong to me. He nodded sympathetically. Family theft cases are always difficult. But if what you're telling me is true, this would be grand theft in the first degree. The penalties are severe. I understand. I just want my property back. Have you considered talking to her first? Giving her a chance to return the ticket voluntarily? I shook my head. Detective, if I confront her directly, she'll just deny everything and probably destroy the ticket to avoid getting caught. The only way to recover it is to catch her in the act of trying to claim it. He studied my face for a moment. You've really thought this through, haven't you? I've had a lot of practice dealing with my sister's theft over the years. Detective Martinez opened a case file and assigned a number to my complaint. Here's what's going to happen, he said. I'm going to contact the Lottery Commission and put an alert on this ticket number. If anyone tries to claim it, they'll notify us immediately. We'll also start building a case file with all your evidence. When your sister attempts to claim the prize, we'll be ready. How long does that usually take? Depends. Some people claim prizes right away, others wait weeks or months. But $42 million? Most people don't wait too long to claim that kind of money. I thanked him and left the station feeling lighter than I had in months. The trap was set. Now, all I had to do was wait for Sarah to walk into it. I didn't have to wait long. 3 days later, Detective Martinez called me. Miss Morrison? This is Detective Martinez. Your sister just tried to claim the lottery prize. My heart started racing. What happened? She went to the lottery headquarters this morning with the ticket and a claim form, but when they ran the ticket number through their system, our alert came up. They stalled her while they called us, and we're on our way there now to arrest her. You're arresting her today? Yes, ma'am. Grand theft, fraud, and attempted theft of state lottery proceeds. She's looking at significant prison time if convicted. I felt a rush of satisfaction so intense it was almost overwhelming. Thank you, Detective. Thank you so much. You'll need to come down to identify the ticket and give a formal statement, but I wanted to call you first. Justice is about to be served. I hung up the phone and immediately drove to the lottery headquarters. When I arrived, I could see the commotion in the parking lot. Police cars, news vans, and a crowd of people with cameras and microphones. Apparently, word had gotten out that someone was being arrested for trying to steal a winning lottery ticket. I parked across the street and waited. About 20 minutes later, the doors to the building opened, and I saw Detective Martinez emerge, followed by 2 uniformed officers. Between them, with her hands cuffed behind her back, was Sarah. She looked completely different from the confident, glowing woman I'd had dinner with 3 days earlier. Her face was pale and streaked with tears, her expensive new dress was wrinkled, and her hair was disheveled. She kept looking around wildly, as if searching for someone to help her. That's when she saw me standing across the street. Our eyes met for a moment, and I saw the exact instant when she realized what had happened. Her face went through a rapid series of expressions: confusion, understanding, rage, and finally, devastating comprehension. "Anna!" she screamed across the parking lot. "Anna, how could you do this to me?" I didn't respond. I just stood there and watched as the police loaded my sister into the back of their car. The reporters were shouting questions at her, cameras were flashing, and she was crying hysterically. It was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen. Detective Martinez walked over to where I was standing. "There's your ticket," he said, holding up the evidence bag containing my lottery ticket. "We'll need to hold on to it until after the trial, but then it's all yours." What happens now? Now she gets booked and arraigned. The Lottery Commission is taking this very seriously. They want to make an example of her to deter other fraud attempts. She's probably looking at 5 to 10 years in prison, plus restitution and fines. I nodded, watching as the police car drove away with Sarah in the back seat. What about the money? Once the trial is over and the ticket is returned to you, you can claim your prize. The Lottery Commission has already verified that you're the rightful owner. That evening, the story was all over the local news. "Local woman arrested for stealing winning lottery ticket," read the headline. They showed footage of Sarah being led away in handcuffs, followed by interviews with lottery officials about their fraud prevention measures. My phone started ringing almost immediately. The first call was from my mother. "Anna, what is going on?" she demanded. "We just saw Sarah on the news. They're saying she stole a lottery ticket." "It's true, Mom. She stole my winning lottery ticket and tried to claim the prize herself." "That's impossible. Sarah would never do something like that. There must be some mistake." I had expected this reaction. "There's no mistake, Mom. I have all the documentation proving I bought the ticket. The police have arrested her for grand theft." "But Anna, this is your sister. How could you have her arrested? Couldn't you have worked this out as a family?" "She stole $42 million from me, Mom. This isn't about borrowing $20 or taking a sweater without asking. This is grand theft." There was a long silence. Then my mother said, "Well, maybe you two could share the money. She is your sister, after all." I almost laughed. Even now, even with Sarah sitting in jail, my mother was trying to find a way to make this my fault and Sarah the victim. "No, Mom, I'm not sharing my lottery winnings with the person who stole them from me." "Anna, I'm very disappointed in you. Family should come first." "You're right, Mom. Family should come first. Maybe you should ask Sarah why she didn't think of that before she stole from me." I hung up on her. 20 minutes later, my father called with a similar message. Then my aunt called. Then my cousin. Somehow, the entire family had decided that I was the villain in this story for having my sister arrested instead of letting her steal my money. I stopped answering the phone. Over the next few weeks, the story continued to dominate local news. It turned out that lottery fraud was rare enough to be fascinating to people, and the fact that it involved sisters made it even more compelling. Sarah's mugshot appeared in newspapers and online articles. Her former clients started coming forward with stories about questionable business practices and sudden disappearances of money. Sarah's boyfriend, Marcus, yes, the same Marcus she'd stolen from me in college, was interviewed by several news outlets. He claimed he'd had no idea about the stolen ticket and was shocked and heartbroken to learn about Sarah's criminal behavior. He moved out of her apartment immediately and reportedly broke up with her via a letter delivered to the jail. The trial began 2 months later. I testified about the theft, presenting all my evidence and explaining exactly how Sarah had convinced me to leave the ticket at her apartment. The prosecutor painted a picture of a pattern of theft and manipulation that had been going on for years. Sarah's defense attorney tried to argue that I had given her the ticket as a gift, but my evidence was too overwhelming. The timestamp on my receipt, the photos of me with the ticket before her theft, the bank records showing when I'd documented everything, it all painted a clear picture of Sarah's guilt. The most damaging testimony came from Sarah herself. Against her lawyer's advice, she chose to take the stand in her own defense. Under cross-examination, she admitted to lying to me about checking the ticket. She admitted to planning to claim the prize herself. She even admitted that she'd known the ticket was mine when she decided to keep it. "I just thought," she said through tears, "that Anna wouldn't know how to handle that much money responsibly. I thought I could manage it better and still help her out." It was the same condescending attitude she'd always had toward me, and the jury saw right through it. They deliberated for less than 2 hours before returning a guilty verdict on all charges. The judge sentenced Sarah to 7 years in prison, plus restitution for the costs of the investigation and trial. Her criminal record meant she'd never be able to work in financial services or any position of trust again. The design business she'd built with my stolen clients collapsed the moment her arrest became public. As for me, I claimed my lottery prize 3 days after the trial ended. After taxes, I walked away with just over $25 million. I bought a house in the hills, not far from where Sarah had planned to live. I started my own graphic design firm and hired away several of her former employees, who were grateful for stable employment after their previous boss turned out to be a criminal. I also started a foundation that provides support for victims of family financial abuse. It turns out that Sarah and I weren't unique. There are thousands of people whose relatives have stolen from them, manipulated them, and convinced them that they deserved it. My foundation helps them get legal representation, document their cases, and recover what was stolen from them. The best part, though, is the knowledge that I'll never have to see Sarah again unless I choose to. She'll be in prison for the next 7 years, and after that, she'll be a convicted felon with no money, no business, no boyfriend, and no family support. Our parents eventually stopped speaking to me entirely when they realized I wasn't going to drop the charges or share my winnings with their favorite daughter. I'm okay with that. I've learned that some people will never change, no matter how many chances you give them. Some people will always choose their own greed over their family's well-being. And some people will keep taking from you until you finally make them stop. It took me 28 years to learn how to stand up to my sister, but when I finally did, I made sure the lesson stuck. 6 months after Sarah's sentencing, I was featured in a magazine article about lottery winners who'd used their money to start charitable foundations. The interviewer asked me if I ever regretted having my sister arrested. Never, I told her. The only thing I regret is that it took me so long to stop being her victim. Do you think you'll ever reconcile with your family? I thought about that for a moment. I hope someday they'll realize that I was the one who was wronged here, not Sarah. But if they don't, I'm at peace with that. I have a good life now, surrounded by people who actually care about me. I don't need people in my life who think I should have let my sister steal $42 million from me just to keep the peace. What would you tell other people who are dealing with family members who take advantage of them? Document everything. Trust your instincts and never, ever let anyone convince you that you have to tolerate abuse just because you're related to your abuser. Family is supposed to support and protect each other, not steal from each other. Today, I'm 31 years old and worth about $30 million after investments and business growth. I live in a beautiful house with a view of the mountains, drive a car I love, and travel whenever I want. I found love with someone who values kindness over manipulation, honesty over cunning. Sarah, meanwhile, is still in prison. She'll be there for another 5 years, assuming she doesn't get in trouble for bad behavior. I hear from mutual acquaintances that she spends most of her time writing letters to our parents, trying to convince them that I somehow framed her. She's apparently become something of a jailhouse lawyer, helping other inmates with their appeals while maintaining her innocence. Sometimes I wonder if she's learned anything from this experience, or if she still believes she was the victim in our story. Part of me suspects that even now, sitting in a prison cell, she's convinced herself that I'm the one who wronged her. That's just who Sarah is. Someone who can never accept responsibility for her own actions. I received one letter from her about a year after her sentencing. It was forwarded through my lawyer since I'd made it clear I didn't want any direct contact. In it, she apologized for the misunderstanding and asked if we could work together to resolve this situation. She suggested that if I dropped the charges and helped her appeal her conviction, we could split the lottery money fairly and put this whole mess behind us. I threw the letter away without finishing it. 3 years have passed since Sarah's arrest, and my life has transformed in ways I never could have imagined. The foundation I started has helped recover over $2 million for victims of family financial abuse. We've successfully prosecuted dozens of cases and helped hundreds of people escape toxic family situations. I've testified before state legislatures about the need for stronger protections against financial elder abuse and inheritance theft. The lottery money gave me the freedom to pursue work that actually matters to me, rather than just scrambling to pay bills. My design firm now employs 12 people, and we specialize in creating marketing materials for nonprofits and social justice organizations. It's work that feels meaningful, and it pays well enough that I've been able to help several of my employees buy their first homes. I've also reconnected with my grandfather's side of the family, relatives I barely knew growing up, because my mother had always claimed they were difficult and dramatic. It turns out they'd simply refused to enable my mother's favoritism towards Sarah. My great-aunt Helen, who's now 92, told me that she'd tried for years to maintain a relationship with me despite my mother's interference. Said, "Your mother always made it clear that Sarah was the important one," Helen said during one of our weekly phone calls. "But I never stopped thinking about you, honey. I'm so proud of the woman you've become." Helen has become something like a surrogate grandmother to me. She's sharp, funny, and has no patience for people who use family relationships to justify bad behavior. When I told her about Sarah and the lottery ticket, she just shook her head and said, "Some people are born takers, Anna. The only thing you can do is make sure they can't take from you anymore." My romantic life has improved dramatically as well. About 2 years after the trial, I met David at a charity fundraiser. He's a public defender who specializes in helping low-income families navigate the legal system. When I told him my story, his first reaction was admiration for how I'd handled the situation. "Most people in your position would have just accepted the theft," he said. "It takes real courage to stand up to family members, especially when everyone else is telling you to keep the peace." David understands that family relationships should be based on mutual respect and support, not blind loyalty regardless of behavior. He's met some of my relatives on my father's side, the ones who've gradually reached out over the years as they've realized I was telling the truth about Sarah. He's never pressured me to reconcile with my parents or forgive my sister before I'm ready. We've been together for a year now, and he's the first person I've ever dated who makes me feel like I deserve to be treated well. It's a strange feeling after growing up in a family where love was conditional and respect had to be earned through submission. David treats me like an equal partner, celebrates my successes without trying to diminish them, and supports my decisions even when they're difficult. Last month, he proposed. The ring is beautiful, a simple solitaire that he designed himself after listening to me talk about the kind of jewelry I like. But more than the ring, I love the way he asked. He said he wanted to spend his life with someone who had the strength to stand up for herself and the compassion to help others do the same. He said watching me build something meaningful from my traumatic experience had made him fall in love with not just who I am, but who I'm becoming. We're planning a small wedding for next spring. Helen will be there, along with the relatives who've chosen to support me. My parents won't be invited. Neither will Sarah, obviously, though she'll still be in prison anyway. Speaking of my parents, they've tried to reach out a few times over the years. Usually around holidays or birthdays, they'll send a card or email suggesting that it's time to let bygones be bygones and heal the family. They never acknowledged that Sarah actually committed a crime or that I was the victim of theft. Their version of reconciliation always involves me pretending that nothing happened and welcoming Sarah back into my life when she gets out of prison. Last Christmas, my mother sent a long email about how Sarah was struggling in prison and how the family needed to come together to support her through this difficult time. She suggested that I could afford to put money in Sarah's commissary account and maybe hire her a better appeals lawyer. I didn't respond, but I did donate an additional $50,000 to my foundation in Sarah's name. The donation went toward legal aid for elderly people whose adult children had stolen their life savings. I've learned that some people will never understand that being related to someone doesn't give them permission to abuse you. My parents still see Sarah as the victim because she's the one in prison, without ever acknowledging that she's in prison because she committed a serious crime against her own sister. They still see me as the problem because I refuse to enable Sarah's behavior. That's fine. I've built a chosen family of people who understand that real love involves accountability, not unconditional tolerance for harmful behavior. Helen, David, my employees, the volunteers at my foundation, the friends I've made through my work, these are my people now. They celebrate my successes without trying to diminish them, support my decisions without trying to manipulate them, and respect my boundaries without making me feel guilty for having them. The foundation has grown beyond anything I initially imagined. We now have offices in 3 states and a staff of 25 people. We've helped recover over $8 million for victims of family financial abuse, and we've successfully lobbied for stronger laws protecting inheritance rights and financial exploitation of vulnerable adults. Last year, I was invited to speak at a national conference about financial crimes. My speech was about the unique challenges of prosecuting family members and why traditional approaches to family reconciliation often enable ongoing abuse. The response was overwhelming. Dozens of people approached me afterward to share their own stories of family financial abuse. One woman told me that her brother had forged her signature to take out a second mortgage on her house, then disappeared with the money. Her parents had begged her not to press charges because it would destroy the family. She'd listened to them, and her brother had never faced consequences. Now she was facing foreclosure, and he was living in another state under an assumed name. Another woman described how her adult daughter had been stealing her Social Security checks for months, claiming she was managing her mother's finances. When the woman tried to report the theft, her other children convinced her that pressing charges would be cruel because their sister was going through a hard time. These stories reminded me why I'd made the right choice with Sarah. Crime doesn't become acceptable just because it's committed by family members. Theft doesn't become sharing just because the victim is related to the thief. And justice doesn't become revenge just because it involves relatives. Sarah has never acknowledged what she did to me. In the few communications that have been forwarded through lawyers, she continues to frame herself as the victim of a misunderstanding or a family dispute that got out of hand. She's never apologized for stealing from me, lying to me, or planning to spend the rest of her life living off money she'd taken from her own sister. I don't expect her to. People like Sarah don't change because they face consequences. They just get better at hiding their behavior or find new victims to target. The only thing that stops them is being physically prevented from continuing their harmful actions. Prison has certainly accomplished that. For the past 3 years, Sarah hasn't been able to steal from anyone, manipulate anyone, or convince anyone that her victims deserved what she did to them. She's been forced to live with the direct consequences of her choices without being able to blame others or escape responsibility. I hope she's learned something from the experience, but I don't need her to. My healing didn't depend on her acknowledgement or apology. It depended on my willingness to stop accepting unacceptable behavior and start protecting myself from people who couldn't be trusted. Next month marks the fourth anniversary of my lottery win and Sarah's arrest. To celebrate, I'm throwing a party at my house for everyone who supported me through the whole ordeal. Helen, David, my employees, my lawyer, Detective Martinez, and the friends I've made through the foundation. We're calling it a Justice and Freedom Party. Detective Martinez, who's become something of a friend over the years, asked me recently if I ever regret the way things turned out. So, now, do you mean do I regret getting justice for a serious crime? I asked him. I mean, do you ever wish you'd handled it differently? Maybe given her a chance to return the ticket voluntarily? I thought about that for a moment. Detective, Sarah had 28 years to treat me with basic respect and decency. She had countless opportunities to choose kindness over cruelty, honesty over manipulation, generosity over greed. She failed every single one of those tests. When she stole my lottery ticket, she wasn't making one bad decision. She was continuing a lifelong pattern of taking whatever she wanted from me and assuming I'd just accept it. So no regrets. None. The only thing I regret is that it took me so long to stop being her victim. 4 years ago, I was a struggling artist working at a coffee shop, constantly being manipulated and stolen from by my own family, convinced that I had to tolerate abuse because we were related. Today, I'm a successful businesswoman, a philanthropist, and someone who's learned to recognize and reject toxic behavior regardless of who it comes from. 4 years ago, Sarah was living in a luxury apartment, driving an expensive car, and running a successful business built on stolen work. Today, she's in prison, will be there for 3 more years, and will emerge as a convicted felon with no money, no business, and no family support. That's not revenge, that's justice. And justice, it turns out, feels exactly like freedom. Sarah gets released in 3 years. When she does, she'll discover that the world has moved on without her. Her former clients have found new designers. Her former friends have new social circles. Her former boyfriend married someone else last year. She'll also discover that I've become someone she can't manipulate, steal from, or intimidate. I'm no longer the naive little sister who believed family loyalty meant accepting abuse. I'm no longer financially vulnerable or emotionally dependent on people who don't respect me. If she tries to contact me when she gets out, she'll find that I've built a life she can't touch. She can't steal my clients because I choose who I work with. She can't manipulate my relationships because I'm surrounded by people who value honesty and integrity. She can't guilt me into supporting her because I've learned to distinguish between actual family love and emotional manipulation. Most importantly, she can't convince me that I owe her anything. I've spent 4 years learning to recognize the difference between forgiveness and enabling, between family loyalty and self-destruction, between keeping the peace and accepting injustice. I wish Sarah well in the abstract way you might wish well for any stranger who's made destructive choices. I hope she finds a way to build an honest life when she gets out of prison. I hope she learns to support herself without stealing from others. I hope she finds people who can tolerate her behavior, since I'm no longer one of them. But I won't be part of that process. I won't be her victim, her supporter, her enabler, or her fallback plan. I'll be what I should have been all along. Someone living her own life, making her own choices, and protecting herself from people who can't be trusted. The little girl who wanted her big sister's love and approval is gone. In her place is a woman who knows she deserves better than what Sarah ever offered, and who's built a life full of people capable of providing it. That might be the greatest victory of all.